Have you ever wondered if you could decode a civilization like it was a piece of software? Well, we're about to dive into a story that does exactly that. It follows a software architect who leaves his perfectly optimized life in Silicon Valley to find the source code of his own identity and maybe even his nation's soul. And the whole story really kicks off with this one single question. This is Arya. He's a top-tier software architect in San Jose. But standing on his high-rise balcony, he has this sudden crisis. He feels less like a person and more like a resource, like a guest account in his own life. And this right here, this is the perfect visual for what's going on in his head. On the left, you've got his life now, a golden cage built out of Jarrett tickets and a kind of high-functioning anonymity. But on the right, you have these powerful sensory memories of home in India, the joy of kite festivals, that feeling of actually belonging. His life feels like a total system error, and he realizes he needs to go back and find the original source code. All right, so this brings us to the first part of his journey, which the story calls a ghost in the machine. This is all about Arya's personal system crash, that feeling of being a ghost in a machine he actually helped to build.
I mean, think about it. He has all the accessories of success, right? The Tesla, the slick apartment, he's fluent in all the Valley jargon. But even with all these user interface upgrades, he feels totally hollow. It's like every morning he's logging into a system that just doesn't recognize him anymore.
The novel actually gives this feeling a name, the golden cage. It's this state where, yeah, you're successful, you're highly functional, but you've basically traded your true, essential self for a really comfortable anonymity. Your neighbors are strangers, and even your friendships have to be scheduled on a calendar. So that feeling, that's the breaking point. It kicks off the next part of the story, debugging history's code. Arya decides he can't be a guest account anymore. He packs his bags and heads back to India to try and understand its 5,000-year-old operating system. And he does not mess around. He jumps right into the deep end, asking his mentor, a man named Neelkanthji, one of the most loaded questions in modern India. He asks if this whole idea of Hindu Rashtra is just a majoritarian virus designed to wipe out the country's diversity. And here's where the novel's core idea really clicks into place. Neelkanthji completely reframes the debate. He argues that Hindu isn't a political label, but an open-source operating system of tolerance. In his view, it's the only thing that's preventing a total civilizational crash in a country with 1 billion different viewpoints. But the book makes sure this isn't just theory. It gives us this really powerful, simple story. During a flood, a village priest sees a stranded Muslim family. He doesn't think, he doesn't debate, he just wades through the floodwaters to bring them food and a blanket. That, the mentor says, is the operating system in action. Instinct, not ideology. So you see, a civilizational crash in this story isn't just about the economy tanking or a political coup. It's what happens when a society loses its foundational toad. Its ability to hold all these different views without just shattering. It's a complete and total system failure. Okay, so if this OS is so powerful, how did it actually work? What was its underlying logic? To get that, Arya has to dig into the ancient schools of Indian philosophy, known as the Shat Darshana. This is such a brilliant move by the author. To make these ancient, complex ideas totally accessible, the book maps them to modern tech concepts. So, Sankhya is analysis, breaking things down. Yoga is engineering, integrating the system. Nyaya is logic, and so on. It's a complete framework for understanding reality. And the book really zooms in on Nyaya, calling it the civilization's logic engine. This wasn't about blind faith at all. It was this incredibly tough system for debate and proof. Basically a unit testing framework for ideas. Nothing got accepted into the main code base unless it passed through this rigorous logical filter. All right, so we have the deep logic, the source code basically. But how do you actually run the program in society? Well, the novel says that's where Dharma comes in. It's the operating system that puts all that logic into practice. And the book presents two main builds of this OS, personified by two epic figures, Rama and Krishna. Rama is the OS of restraint, who always prioritizes duty and ethical boundaries, Maryada. But then you have Krishna, the OS of action, who argues for necessary, detached action, especially when faced with great injustice. Two different approaches for two very different situations. Rama is the embodiment of this idea of Maryada Purushottam. He operates on a dharma-centric model, which is the complete opposite of the user-centric model Arya knows from Silicon Valley. For Rama,
Leadership wasn't about what he could gain. It was about protecting the integrity of the whole system, even if it cost him everything.
But Krishna's teaching on the battlefield of Kurukshetra gives us that crucial counterbalance. His message is pretty clear. When the system itself is fundamentally corrupt, doing nothing is a moral failure. Sometimes you have to be willing to format the drive to save the whole system. The cost of good people staying silent is just too high.
And this all leads to the final, and maybe the most mind-blowing part of the whole thing. How do you take these individual principles of right action and scale them up to build an entire just and stable empire?
Well, the novel presents the famous story of Chanakya and Chandragupta like a strategic project plan. It starts with a personal insult, which leads to a vow to replace the corrupt OS. Then Chanakya finds his prototype leader, Chandragupta, and enters the build phase. And finally, you get the launch, a brand new empire.
And this is the moment everything changes. Chanakya's vow isn't just about personal revenge. He sees the corrupt king as a bug in the system, a corrupt OS. And his mission is to find a new leader who understands the most fundamental layer of the system, the BIOS of Dharma. He's planning a full reboot of the civilization.
So this slide just lays out the whole blueprint. It starts with one person, just one, aligning their actions with Dharma. Then a mentor spots that character and scales it through leadership. That leader then turns those principles into state policy. And from that, an entire society gets built on welfare and security. It scales from 1 to millions.
So what's the big idea here? What does this all boil down to? It's this. A truly great, lasting civilization isn't built by warriors and conquerors. It's built by architects of character. It's about taking the integrity of one person and scaling it into the very structure of society.
So, why does any of this matter to us, right now? Well, because it reframes history, not as a bunch of dusty old facts, but as a living, breathing, operating system that we can still interact with. It connects these ancient ideas to the very real challenges we all face today. And it really makes you ask yourself, am I just a spectator, or am I a builder?
In the end, the novel turns the entire question back to us. Arya's journey gives us a kind of map for how a person, or even a nation, can deconstruct and debug their own code. But the story leaves us with this final lingering thought. Now that you've seen how it's done, where does your own search begin?